There is a moment in a man's life when something inside him suddenly goes quiet. He stops explaining. He stops chasing approval. He stops trying to prove that he is worthy. And strangely, that is when people begin to notice him. Because the most dangerous person is not the loudest one in the room. It is the person who no longer needs the room to applaud him. When you no longer need to be understood, praised, chosen, or validated, you become difficult to control. People can no longer manipulate you with rejection. They can no longer control you with criticism. They can no longer make you desperate with silence. This is one of the deepest lessons of Stoicism. Your power begins where your need for approval ends. Hello everyone, welcome to the Stoic Hypnosis channel. In this video, we will uncover why letting go of validation can completely change the way people see you, and more importantly, the way you see yourself. And by the end, you may realize something uncomfortable. You were never powerless. You were simply giving your power away. Now, let's get started. Part 1. The prison of needing to be seen. Most people think they are living freely, but if you look closely, many are quietly living for an audience they cannot see. They choose their words carefully because they are afraid of being judged. They make certain decisions because they want to be admired. They tolerate people who disrespect them because they are terrified of being rejected. And sometimes they even abandon what they truly want because they are afraid of what others might think. They call it being kind. They call it being humble. They call it keeping the peace. But deep down, it is often something else, the need to be accepted. And this need can become a prison so invisible that you don't even realize you're inside it. Think about how much of your emotional state can be controlled by other people. Someone praises you, and suddenly you feel valuable. Someone criticizes you, and your confidence disappears. Someone responds warmly, and you feel wanted. Someone becomes distant, and you spend the entire night wondering what you did wrong. That is not freedom. That is emotional dependence. The Stoics understood something that most people spend years trying to learn. You cannot control how people perceive you. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control, while others are not. Other people's opinions belong to the second category, yet we spend enormous amounts of energy trying to control them. We explain ourselves, we defend ourselves, we prove ourselves, we perform, we chase. And every time we do, we silently tell the world, your opinion determines my worth. But imagine what happens when you stop. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you no longer need everyone to understand you. You no longer need to win every argument. You no longer need to prove that you are a good person. You simply know who you are. And that is where something powerful begins. Because when you stop asking the world, do you approve of me, you finally have enough silence to ask yourself, do I approve of the person I have become? Part 2. The day you stop explaining yourself. There comes a point in life when you realize something painful. You can explain yourself perfectly, and some people will still misunderstand you. You can tell them your intentions. You can explain your heart. You can show them the evidence. You can spend hours trying to prove that you never meant to hurt them. And yet, they may still choose the version of you that makes them feel comfortable. This is where many people lose themselves. They keep explaining. They keep defending. They keep trying to correct every misunderstanding because somewhere inside, they believe that if everyone understood them, they would finally feel at peace. But peace does not come from being understood. It comes from no longer needing to be. The Stoics recognized a brutal truth about human nature. You do not control the story people create about you. Someone may call you arrogant when you become confident. Someone may call you selfish when you finally establish boundaries. Someone may say you've changed when you simply stop accepting the treatment you once tolerated. And if you are addicted to validation, you will immediately rush back. You will explain. You will apologize. You will shrink yourself. You will become the old version of yourself just to make someone else comfortable. But the moment you stop doing that, something changes. Silence becomes your answer. Not because you are weak, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understand that not every accusation deserves a defense. There is incredible strength in allowing people to misunderstand you. Think about that. You don't have to correct every opinion. You don't have to respond to every insult. You don't have to convince everyone that your intentions were pure. Your character is revealed through your actions over time, not through the arguments you win in a single conversation. Marcus Aurelius understood this kind of inner discipline. He constantly reminded himself to focus on what belonged to him, his judgments, his choices, his character. Not the applause, not the gossip, not the opinions of strangers. And once you adopt that mindset, rejection loses much of its power, because you stop living like a lawyer defending your existence. You start living like a person who knows his own worth. And strangely enough, the less you explain yourself, the more seriously people begin to take you. Not because you became louder, but because you finally became certain. Before we continue, I want to ask you something simple. Do you think you need other people's approval to feel valuable? Just answer yes or no in the comments, and if you want, tell us why. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. So please share your thoughts below and let everyone learn from each other's experiences. And if this video is speaking to something you've been going through, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means more than you might think. It gives us the motivation to keep creating deeper, more meaningful videos that can help you become stronger, calmer, and more in control of your life. Now, let's continue, because the next lesson goes even deeper. What happens when you stop chasing people who never truly valued you? Part 3. When rejection stops controlling you. One of the deepest forms of freedom is no longer being afraid of losing people. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understood that losing the wrong person is not always a loss. For most of your life, you may have been taught to hold on. Hold on to relationships. Hold on to friendships. Hold on to people who have already changed. Hold on to conversations that ended long ago. And sometimes you hold on simply because you are terrified of what their absence will make you feel. You think, what if they leave? But the better question is, what if I keep losing myself just to make them stay? That question can change everything. When you desperately need someone to stay, you give them enormous power over your emotional state. Their attention becomes your reward. Their distance becomes your punishment. Their silence becomes something you obsess over. You start reading between the lines. You analyze messages. You wonder why they changed. You ask yourself what you did wrong. And without realizing it, your peace becomes dependent on another person's behavior. The Stoics would tell you to step back. Look at the situation without begging reality to become different. People are allowed to leave. People are allowed to misunderstand you. People are allowed to change their feelings. And as painful as that truth may be, none of it determines your value. You cannot force someone to appreciate you. You cannot negotiate someone into loving you. You cannot perform perfectly enough to make someone choose you. And the moment you accept that, rejection begins to lose its sting. Because rejection no longer means, I am not enough. It simply means, this person is not choosing me. Those are two completely different statements. One attacks your identity. The other describes reality. And a person with emotional strength learns to separate the two. You can be rejected and still remain valuable. You can be abandoned and still remain whole. You can be misunderstood and still remain at peace. This is where self-respect begins. You stop chasing people who repeatedly make you question your worth. You stop begging for attention. You stop negotiating for basic respect. You stop trying to convince someone to see what you already know about yourself. And perhaps the most powerful thing happens next. You become willing to walk away without hatred. No revenge. No dramatic goodbye. No attempt to make them regret losing you. You simply leave with your dignity intact. Because when you no longer fear losing people, you become impossible to control through the threat of losing them. And that is a kind of freedom most people never experience, not because nobody can leave you, but because you finally know that you will never leave yourself again. Part 4. The power of becoming indifferent to applause. There is a strange moment that happens when you stop trying to impress people. You begin doing things quietly. You work without announcing it. You improve without asking anyone to notice. You become disciplined without needing to tell the world how disciplined you are. And slowly, something changes. You become harder to manipulate. Because applause is one of the most subtle addictions a human being can develop. We want people to notice our success. We want them to recognize our sacrifices. We want someone to say, "I knew you could do it." And there is nothing wrong with appreciating encouragement. The problem begins when encouragement becomes necessary, when you cannot move forward unless someone is watching, when you only feel successful if someone compliments you, when your happiness depends on being recognized. At that point, you are no longer pursuing excellence. You are performing for an audience. And the audience can control you. If they stop clapping, you start doubting yourself. If they criticize you, you change direction. If they ignore you, you question whether your efforts were worth anything. But the Stoic mindset asks you to reverse the equation. Do the right thing even when nobody notices. Build your body when nobody is watching. Read when nobody praises you. Keep your promises when nobody will ever know you kept them. Walk away from temptation when there is no applause for your restraint. Because true character is built in moments that produce no recognition. Marcus Aurelius was surrounded by power, wealth, influence, and attention. Yet he repeatedly reminded himself not to become dependent on external praise. Why? Because praise is temporary. Today they may call you brilliant. Tomorrow they may call you foolish. Today they may admire your strength. Tomorrow they may criticize your choices. If your identity depends on their opinion, you will spend your entire life becoming a different person for different audiences. One version for your family, another for your friends, another for strangers, another for social media. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize you don't even know who you are anymore. Freedom begins when you stop performing. You don't need to announce every victory. You don't need to prove every sacrifice. You don't need everyone to understand your journey. Let your life speak. Let your discipline speak. Let your consistency speak. And most importantly, let your character become so solid that praise becomes pleasant, but unnecessary. Because there is something incredibly powerful about a person who can walk into a room without needing to be the most impressive person in it. They don't demand attention. They don't chase recognition. They don't compete for validation. They simply exist with quiet certainty. And that certainty creates a presence people can feel. The world may not always understand such a person, but it notices them. Because when you no longer need applause, you finally become free to do what deserves applause. Part 5. The most powerful person in the room. Eventually, you reach a point where you stop asking, "How do I make people value me?" and you begin asking a much harder question. Am I living in a way that makes me respect myself? That is the turning point. Because when your sense of worth comes from the outside, you are always vulnerable. Someone can ignore you. Someone can reject you. Someone can criticize you. Someone can leave. And suddenly, your entire emotional world begins to collapse. But when your worth comes from your own character, something changes. You become grounded. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You don't need to have the final word. You don't need to prove that you are stronger. You don't need to win every argument. You simply know who you are. And there is an almost frightening strength in that kind of person. They can walk away without making a scene. They can remain silent when others are desperate to provoke them. They can accept criticism without allowing it to define them. They can receive praise without becoming addicted to it. They can lose people without losing themselves. This is not arrogance, it is emotional independence. And perhaps this is what the Stoics were trying to teach all along. Your greatest victory is not controlling other people, it is controlling yourself. You cannot control who respects you, but you can control whether you live honorably. You cannot control who stays, but you can control whether you betray yourself just to make someone stay. You cannot control what people say about you, but you can control the person you become when they say it. And once you understand this, you stop living defensively. You stop waking up every morning asking the world for permission to feel worthy. You simply begin living, quietly, deliberately, with discipline, with dignity. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this: you no longer need to become impressive. You become authentic. You no longer need to make people regret losing you. You become someone who doesn't need revenge. You no longer need to prove that you were right. You become someone who is comfortable with being misunderstood. And you no longer chase respect. You live in a way that earns your own. Remember this: the moment you stop needing everyone to recognize your value is the moment their inability to recognize it stops hurting you. You become dangerous, not because you are cruel, cold, or emotionless, but because you can no longer be controlled by the things that once controlled you. Rejection cannot break you. Silence cannot destroy you. Criticism cannot define you. Loneliness cannot force you back into places where you were never respected, and approval can no longer buy your loyalty. That is real strength. Not the strength to dominate others, the strength to remain yourself when the world tries to convince you to become someone else. So if you remember only one thing from this video, remember this: stop trying to be valuable in the eyes of everyone else. Build a life that makes you valuable in your own eyes, because once you genuinely respect yourself, you stop begging the world to respect you. And that is when your presence begins to speak louder than your words ever could. Conclusion. The deepest lesson is this: your worth should never depend on someone else's approval. People may misunderstand you, reject you, criticize you, or walk away. And none of these things define who you are. Start applying this today. Stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided to misunderstand you. Stop chasing those who make you question your value. Do your work quietly. Keep your promises, protect your peace, and measure yourself by your character, not by applause. Every night, ask yourself one simple question: did I live today according to the person I want to become? If the answer is yes, you are already moving in the right direction. You don't need to become cold or distant. You simply need to become strong enough to remain yourself without constantly seeking validation. If this video helped you, subscribe to the channel and support us in creating more deep, meaningful content to help you become stronger, calmer, and wiser. Your support gives us the motivation to continue. Thank you for taking the time to watch until the end of the video. See you in the next videos.